For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome. I'm Ashwin Ahmad and I'm very pleased to be in conversation with Ambassador Dinkar Srivastava. Ambassador Srivastava has many firsts to his name. As Joint Secretary UNP, he participated in Indian lobbying efforts to contain the diplomatic fallout of the Pokhran II nuclear tests. He also prevented the internationalization of the Jammu and Kashmir issue during the Kargil War. He has dealt with India's candidature for permanent membership of the UN Security Council. And last but not least, as India's ambassador to Iran, he negotiated the MOU for Indian participation in the Chabar port. Today, we are discussing his latest book, Forgotten Kashmir, The Other Side of the Line of Control, where he writes about the evolution of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir over the last 7 decades. Ambassador Srivastava, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Ashwin, for a very generous introduction.
Sir, the pleasure is ours. Now, first off, Pakistan has claimed the 1947 uprising in Kashmir was indigenous, but you have explained through Pakistani sources at that, how it was orchestrated by themselves. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this?
You know, there were at least 4 meetings chaired by Liaquat Ali Khan, which took the decision to launch the tribal invasion. And this is recorded by one of the main, figures in the drama who assumed the pseudonym of General Tariq. And the interesting thing is that another activist called Yusuf Sarraf, who was a Muslim conference activist, later became the Chief Justice of POK Supreme Judicial Court. He has written, there were no Kashmiris present or invited in any of the meetings at higher level where the tribal invasion was decided. Even though most of these Kashmiri leaders by then had crossed over to Lahore from India. There is again a very interesting episode that the decision to announce provisional government was based on 2 telephone calls from Rawalpindi. One was Khwaja Rahim, and this was the commissioner of Rawalpindi, and the other was Begum Naseem. Begum Naseem was the wife of the colonel who was of the Pakistan army who was leading the tribal invasion as General Tariq. Now, then as now, the decisions regarding Kashmir were being made in Rawalpindi, which was army headquarters, though capital was Karachi. Last but not the least, the Provisional Declaration of Independence, which was issued by Sardar Ibrahim, the first president of POK. It does not mention anywhere the Punch uprising, which in the later narrative built by Pakistan was the central event which triggered the so-called indigenous uprising.
Ambassador, you've quoted Jinnah as saying Kashmiris can go to hell. And you've also talked about mainstream Pakistani leaders dismissing POK altogether. Now, how has this affected Kashmiris living in POK over the last 7 decades?
Jinnah's comment was pre-partition. He had visited Kashmir Valley in 1944. This is the last time he visited. And he was approached by some Muslim conference leaders. And his response was that, Kashmiris can go to hell, which caused a lot of heartburn. Post-partition and emergence of Pakistan, this story has continued. POK was ruled on the basis of rules of business issued by Rawalpindi, where the Ministry of Kashmir Affairs was located for first 23 years of its existence. There's another interesting episode that a president of POK went to meet the Joint Secretary in Ministry of Kashmir Affairs, and he was asked by the Joint Secretary to sit in his PA's room because a call was coming from Karachi, which was then the capital. So Kashmir, POK was and to date has been directly ruled by Islamabad regardless of the wishes of the people, and this naturally has caused lot of resentment. The fast forward to 2018, this was Gilgit-Baltistan Assembly, and Pakistan had just introduced Gilgit-Baltistan order, and mind you, the nomenclature is order, it's not a constitution, so it's again an executive fiat. 7 decades after independence, Gilgit-Baltistan, which is 85% of POK, is still ruled directly by Islamabad on the basis of orders. Now, this order took away powers granted to the elected assembly by Gilgit-Baltistan order of 2009, where the elected assembly could legislate on 61 issues. So this rollback took place, and this caused a lot of protests, and the copies of the Gilgit-Baltistan order were torn by members of Gilgit-Baltistan Assembly in the presence of Pakistan's Prime Minister. This is Shah Khaqan Abbasi, who took over as Prime Minister after Nawaz Sharif demitted. Despite the protests and the legal challenge, the people then moved the Gilgit-Baltistan Supreme Judicial Court, which set aside the order. Pakistan government went to Pakistan Supreme Court, which sided with the Pakistan government against the people of Gilgit-Baltistan and restored the order which the people were protesting against. Now, this tells you how the people of that territory, which is 85% of POK, have been treated. They have been promised by Imran Khan that they would be given provisional provincial status. It's nowhere in coming, and it is deliberate because that would be a too overt violation of the UN Security Council resolutions which Pakistan upholds. But in the meantime, the territory is fully integrated in Pakistan, and this comes out from the fact that Supreme Court of Pakistan heard a case and gave a decision on a territory which is not part of Pakistan under Pakistani constitution. So there's a complete anomaly. Pakistan maintains the fiction that it is observing the Security Council resolutions and therefore it's not part of the Pakistani territory. And yet Pakistani Supreme Court exercises jurisdiction. Pakistani government continues to rule the territory on the basis of executive fiats.
Ambassador, I'm glad you brought up Pakistan's argument on Kashmir. You also speak about Pakistan's continuous demand for a plebiscite, but it has never really pressed it because they fear, as you point out, that they would actually lose territory. Now, why do you feel this could happen? And what are the fears on the ground?
You have brought up a very important issue. Plebiscite for Kashmir is central to Pakistan's narrative in international fora. Yet, on 3 specific occasions, when proposals were made for plebiscite, Pakistan shied away. The first such occasion was November 1947, when Mountbatten offered plebiscite to Jinnah. His argument was that, look, your attempt to grab Kashmir by force has failed, so this is your best option. And Mountbatten suggested plebiscite under UN auspices. Jinnah refused. Now, why did he refuse? Because the tribal invasion had resulted in mass killing, looting and rape of Hindu and Muslims alike. So those memories were still fresh. as Alistair Lamb in his first book on Kashmir has remarked. The second occasion was 1950, when UN mediator Owen Dixon came to the subcontinent. Owen Dixon suggested regional plebiscite because he said a single plebiscite across the entire state would leave pockets of minorities on either side of the divide and lead to mass migration, which is exactly what had happened during partition, and in fact in 1950 was still continuing. So to avoid it, he suggested regional plebiscite, limited it to the valley because in other areas more or less the population composition had made it clear. In the valley, Muslims were 70%, but National Conference, which was the main political force, had opted for India's. Hence the suggestion. Now, Owen Dixon, in his report to the United Nations, which is part of UN documentation, has said India was willing to consider it, even though the 70% population was Muslim. Pakistan rejected it. And Pakistan's stated ground was that this was a departure from the principle of single plebiscite. In the same paragraph, Owen Dixon says, but I was given to understand that Pakistan would be willing to accept partition of the valley, provided a partition of Kashmir, provided it got the valley. So it was willing to make a departure from the principle as long as it got the valley, and it got the valley without a vote. The third and the most significant occasion, this is August 1953, just after the dismissal of Sheikh Abdullah, when India is supposed to have lost its main card in the valley. Pakistan pressed for a bilateral summit. India was not very keen but accepted it. Muhammad Ali Bokra, the Pakistani Prime Minister, came to India. He signed a joint communique with Pandit Nehru in which both sides agreed to plebiscite. 3 months later, in December 1953, he communicated that this is not acceptable. Pakistan had gone back on the idea of plebiscite in December 53. This is 4 months before Nehru finally closed the chapter in April 1954. Now, why did he do it? And especially after, Sheikh Abdullah's arrest and ouster. The reason was, and the same argument that, it's a departure from the principle of single plebiscite, but as we have seen, they were willing to make the departure as long as they were sure of getting the valley without a vote. There was an added reason. The added reason was that in April 1950, Sardar Ibrahim, the first president of POK, was sacked. This was the beginning of Sudan revolt. Sudan was his tribe, which rose in revolt against his sacking. And this led to a full-fledged military operation by Pakistan Army, which lasted for more than 6-7 years. In fact, in 1955, Muslim Conference gave a memorandum to Pakistani Constituent Assembly complaining of mass detention, arrests, rape, and ill treatment of women and children, which was produced by the Indian delegation 2 years later in Security Council as part of the UN documentation. Now, the issue is, with this kind of disturbed situation on its own side of the line of controls, or ceasefire line as it was then called, Pakistan was not sure of winning the vote in POK itself, and that is why, despite the fact that Pandit Nehru had agreed to a plebiscite in August 53, in 1953, even after Sheikh Abdullah's ouster, it went back on that promise.
Ambassador, now let me come to the China part of it. China has large-scale investment in POK, but at the same time, the government recently cleared a bill which gives the army sweeping control over CPEC projects, which has led to talks of a parallel government, at least in the Pakistani media. Now, I'd like you to explain to us, how does more military control over CPEC projects benefit China, and how does it affect Pakistan and India?
Gilgit-Baltistan has always been under Pakistan Army's control. This has simply made a de facto situation de jure. Now, what is China doing? They are investing. They are investing in a very big way in Gilgit-Baltistan. In fact, of the total of $46 billion of credit, largely it is credit, not investment, promised to Pakistan under CPEC. It's actually been scaled down from 46 to 23 billion. Nearly half is coming to Gilgit-Baltistan because this is the strategically most important part. This is where CPEC enters Pakistan. This is where Indus enters Pakistan. And China has promised to build a series of dams. They have signed an MOU for construction of Daimar Bhasha Dam worth $12 billion. China has extracted a commitment from Pakistan government of 17% return on investment in dollar terms. So Chinese investment is fully secured. The only Pakistani power sector and the economy is in doldrums, but Pakistan government has nevertheless committed this high return. Where will the return come from? By hiking the power tariff. So it will be the Pakistani consumer which will be paying for the military, flirtation with China, because China for the Pakistan military is the ultimate, they are the iron brother, they are the tested, most trusted friendship.
Yes.
They have bought a political insurance.
Sorry.
So
Ambassador, So Ambassador, now also there is large, as you talked about, this large-scale Chinese investment in POK, and there's also talk of a huge loss to the people of POK as well. How much are their livelihoods affected, and what is the future for them?
One of the ironies is that so much of investment which is going into this area in POK and Gilgit, most of it is going into Gilgit-Baltistan, which will absorb about 12 to 14 billion dollars. About $4 billion are going into, $2 billion are going into POK. Now, Mangla Dam is in POK. It was completed in 1967. First 36 years, Pakistan did not pay POK any amount for either the water or electricity produced by Mangla Dam. When the payment began, POK was paid 15 paisa per unit, while Punjab and Northwest Frontier Province, now called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, get 1 rupee 10 paisa per unit, 7 times more. Now, this discriminatory treatment is justified on the ground that under Pakistan's constitution, hydroelectric royalty, which is called net, the technical term is NHP, net hydropower, that is only given to Pakistan's provinces, and POK does not fit this category. Now, the issue is when it came to exploiting POK's natural resources, its distinct status did not stand in the way of exploiting the natural resources. That issue was raised by Pakistan only when it came to making the payment. Going forward, this exploitation is going to increase more in future with more dams being built, and hydroelectric, the dam construction invariably leads to population displacement, which is what happened in 67. So the people of POK and increasingly Gilgit-Baltistan, and Gilgit-Baltistan also has a very fragile ecosystem, and there has been a lot of earthquakes. It also has a very fragile Shia-Sunni, ethnic balance, with Shias having about 6% majority, which will probably get eroded with the influx of outsiders. And neither of the two will get any benefit from this money which is coming into Pakistan, because they don't get hydropower royalty.
Ambassador, I think you've summed it up very well. Pakistan, as you concluded, will allow neither azadi nor autonomy, and with pressure from China, that is most likely to continue. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your insights on the future of POK. I urge everyone to read this book. It's a fascinating account into an area that has not much been talked about. Thank you very much, Ambassador, once again, and we look forward to hearing from you more.
Thank you, Ashwin. Thank you.